Hi Roberts Kindergarten, it's Miss Gass with this week's science challenge. And we actually have two science challenges this week, but both of them have to do with recycling. So we read this book by Gail Gibbons about the ways that we recycle different materials. And one of the materials that we recycle is paper. And when we recycle paper, they take our old paper and they mix it up with, here it is, they mix it up with some chemicals and a lot of water, and they make it into really tiny pieces, and then they flatten it out and they cut new paper so that we can have new paper made from old paper, which is great. It's a great way to not have to cut down more trees. So today we are going to do our own paper making using recycled paper. So here's what you're going to need. You're going to need some paper from your recycling bin. Mine is regular paper that I've been using for teaching, but yours might be newspaper, it might be construction paper, it doesn't have to be white paper, okay? So you need recycled paper. You need, there's two choices here. You do need a grown-up for this experiment, so make sure you have a grown-up handy. And you have two choices. So if you have a blender that you might make milkshakes or smoothies in or whatever, you can use that. My blender is broken, but I have a food processor, so I'm hoping that's gonna work the same way. That's another choice. But if you don't have either of those things, you just need a jar, hopefully bigger than this, but this one would work, with a lid on it that you can put a lid on and shake. Okay, so I'm gonna use my little Cuisinart thing here, food processor, and the first thing you're gonna do is you are going to tear your paper up into little pieces, okay? And tear it all up. I think I tried to tear too much at the same time. Okay, that's your first step. Okay, so I have my paper torn up and I have put it into my blender, my food processor. Now, if you are using a jar, your steps are the same so far, okay? You would be putting your paper into your jar, okay? So the next step is to take some water and to pour it in with your paper. And grown-ups who are watching, the directions are about 2/3 of the way up. So kindergartners, that's not all the way. Okay, so about there. Okay, now if you are using the jar option, what you're going to do is you are going to fill it up, then you are going to shake it, and then you are going to need to leave it alone for a while. Okay, so a couple of hours. So if you do this project in the morning, you could maybe come back to it after lunch, or if you started around lunchtime, you could maybe come back to it a little before dinner. But a couple of hours, you could set a timer. Okay, if you're using this option, you don't have to wait, but you do have to have an adult help you to turn on the blender and mix it up. Okay, so I mixed mine up and I want you to take a look and see what it looks like in there. Can you see it? Yes, you can. So that is what we call pulp. Okay, so for this next step, you are going to need something to squeeze water into. And you are also going to need a place to put your paper out to dry, because it's going to be wet. It's not going to be dry like paper. So this is also the same step after you've waited a couple hours. If you have used your jar, you're going to do the same thing after a couple hours. Okay, so what you're going to do is you are going to take some of your pulp. All right, you are going to squeeze the water out. Okay, so you want to squeeze it with your hands, get all that water out of there, because we don't really think of paper as being watery, do we? Okay, yeah, get it all out. And once you feel like you've gotten the water out, what you're going to do is you're going to try to flatten it. Okay, so you're going to flatten it into a, like a pancake. Okay, now I think if you practice this and get better at it, it will, oh, Miss Cass flattened, maybe squeezed too much water out. So maybe don't squeeze that much water out because it's going to fall apart. Let me try that again. I'm going to get it wet again. It might also just be that my pulp is not chopped up enough. Okay. All right. Take 2, kindergarten. All right. I am going to squeeze most of the water out, but not all of it, because I don't want it to be too dry. And I think while I'm doing that, I am going to flatten it like a pancake. Okay. Now, we are not the machines that they have at actual recycling centers, right? So our paper is not going to be perfect like actual recycled paper is. Okay, now I've got my pancake. I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. Okay, it's kind of lumpy. May have needed to blend that a little bit more. You guys might want to blend yours a little bit more. And I'm going to lay it on a flat surface and let it dry. Okay, so when it dries, it is going to be a lumpy pancake piece of paper. So some tips if you want your paper, your recycled paper, to be less lumpy are you can let it sit in the water for longer. That's going to help the paper break down the fibers in the paper. Your blender might be better than my food processor and be able to chop it better as well. Chop it up into tinier pieces. So I'm going to actually put this outside to dry, and I will post pictures of it when it's all dry, and we can decide once your paper is dry what you want to do with it. I'm thinking this I could maybe paint. It's kind of a circular shape. I could paint it. I could make it into like a little earth. I could paint it with blues and greens and give it as a present. I could put a hole in it and make it into something you hang up like an ornament. All sorts of things you could do with it. So I would love to see what you guys come up with, how it works out for you, and what you decide to make with your recycled paper. All right, have fun.